Hello and welcome to today's learning session, Community-Based Monitoring, Reporting, and Verification, organized by World Wildlife Fund's Forest and Climate Program. Thanks for taking the time to join us. My name is Breen Burns and I'm a manager for learning and communications. And our presenters today are Maria Jose Pacha, a consultant for WWF, Naikoa Aguilar Amachustegui, MRV coordinator for the Forest and Climate Program, and Lucy Goodman, Senior Project Manager with the Global Canopy Programme. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics and some frequently asked questions. For those of you who've participated in our past learning sessions, this will sound familiar, but yes, today's presentation is being recorded and you can find the recording within a few days on our YouTube channel. To get to the recording, simply go to youtube.com and search for WWF Forest and Climate, or go to panda.org/forestclimate and look for the red learning section. There are two audio options. You can listen via your computer speakers, or you can dial in through the phone numbers that were provided in your registration email. It's important to keep in mind that if you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer, this is sometimes caused by having too many browser windows or software applications open, so feel free to close some of them and that usually solves the problem. Or you're always welcome to join us via phone. If you're having any technical difficulties, please send Jenny Guzman, my colleague, a message via the chat area if possible, and we will try to get it sorted out. And finally, questions are absolutely welcome. And today, because we have a few presenters, if possible, please indicate whether your question is for a specific presenter when you submit it. And we're all in different offices right now, so that makes it easier logistically to sort out who can best answer your question. You can send your questions using the toolbar on your screen, and we will answer as many as possible during our allotted time. And after the webinar, you'll receive a link in your follow-up email with further resources and a place to find, again, links to this recording as well as materials related to the session. So thank you again for joining us, and with that we will get started, and we will start with Maria. Maria, please go ahead.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to introduce you to the session. First, we're going to talk about what is CMRV and what are at stake at the moment. Then we're going to discuss about the knowledge exchange that happened in August 2014 and tell you a little bit more about who participated and which were our objectives. Then we will look at different tools and approaches for CMRV that we are tested and used in the workshop. Fourthly, we're going to present a case study where CMRV is being used intensively in Guyana. And then we're going to discuss the enabling conditions that are needed for CMRV to happen at different levels and discuss which are the key messages that were recorded from the workshop in August. So thank you, Bryn. Next, please. So first, I think that we need to be clear that to measure the effectiveness of a RED scheme and receive the financial incentives associated with emission reduction of greenhouse gases, it is crucial to measure, report, and verify those emissions reductions. To ensure that emission reduction is permanent and additional, the MRV system is required to estimate carbon emissions at the national level while assessing the effectiveness of RED demonstration activity or projects and improving the accuracy of the greenhouse gases accounting at the subnational level. Thus, the MRV system needs to integrate and manage data across geographical scales and multiple government levels. Next, please. So I think it's important at this point that we try to have an approach to clarify what is for us CMRV, or community-based monitoring, reporting, and verification. Also, this is known as participatory MRV, and could be defined as the involvement of local people in the measurement, reporting, and verification of carbon stocks and other data, such as biodiversity, ecosystem services, drivers of deforestation or degradation, that are required to assess the impact and co-benefits of REDD. In this context, community MRV or participatory MRV could have the potential to provide cost-effective and locally collected biomass data, promote equality in benefit sharing, and maximize the social and environmental co-benefits of REDD. The involvement of local people who may have varying skills, expertise, societal roles, and interest in monitoring activities could bring important local information on forest status and management, and also address key issues in REDD as biodiversity and social safeguards. Next, please. Also, CMRV could be an appropriate way to assess the safeguards in the Cancun Agreements defined in 2010, especially the full and effective participation of relevant stakeholders, in particular indigenous peoples and local communities, B, conservation of natural forests and biological diversity, and enhancement of other social and environmental benefits, and help to build a transparent and effective national forest governance structure. Further on following Durban outcomes, countries need to develop a safeguards information system to report how they are addressing and respecting the Cancun safeguards. Next, please, and thank you. I'll give the floor to my colleague, Naikoa.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, everybody, for being here. So, when you have this context in which we have MRV, we need to measure carbon at the national level, we have to comply with the Cancun safeguards in terms of benefit sharing, indigenous peoples and local communities' rights, make sure that REDD implementation does not damage their integrity as well as that of biodiversity. It's easier said than done. And we decided that we needed to have a discussion in which all levels that could be involved in this community MRV and how this should be implemented needed to get together in a place and come face to face with the realities of how that is supposed to happen and discuss them. One key element that we included was the technology side, because we have seen in the last years a boom of technologies and or tools, especially with cell phones, for the collection of data in the field. And we decided it was important to put together in the same place indigenous representatives to share their know-how on a South-South know-how sharing among themselves about their experiences on MRV. Tool developers, or techno geeks as we can call them, who in many cases develop the tools, but they don't come face to face with the realities of the implementation of the use of these tools in the context of the real world, as well as government entities as a means to catalyze the necessary dialogue that needs to be established between national government agencies or subnational who are involved in the process of MRV and communities themselves, and perhaps see what are the enabling conditions and the factors that need to be taken into consideration, apart from the technology ones, for the successful implementation of CMRV and its incorporation into the overall MRV process for REDD+ as a whole. So we carried out this workshop in Guyana. We chose Guyana because Guyana has been for the last few years the only national MRV, has had the only national MRV system that has been linked with payment versus performance with the Norwegian-Guyana agreement, and also because there's been a long process with the North Rupununi communities, about which Lucy Goodman from GCP will tell us about a little bit further in the presentation. And it's a very well established CMRV program. We had participants from 15 countries, and as I said before, we had decision makers, technology developers, and community members. And the overall objectives were basically share know-how, understand the challenges. These involved hands-on experience in the forest, in the most difficult scenario. So we were in a place where there was no access to internet or cell phone signal, as well as discuss the enabling conditions, as I already mentioned. Next, bring please. So among the technologies that we use and we tested, we carried out several exercises. So the idea was to be in a forest setting, go to the forest, and then try to go through the process of assessing the different tools that we were going to expose our participants to under the set of questions of why use technology first, what type of technologies should be available and which ones are the ones that perhaps would be useful under these circumstances within which we would be working, when and what for use the technologies, and specifically as well the how to use these technologies. And this involves a series of aspects pertaining from not only from the conception of the use of the technology and why use the phone, all the way to the really come face to face with the logistical challenges, for which we had several experiences in which things that we have for granted under certain circumstances are not so, and then we need to do adaptive management. So all these discussions and all these exercises were tried to be incorporated into the assessment of the tools. Next. Among the tools that we tested and used for the exercise during the workshop, we include tools that are used with software support that require people to be able to read. Believe it or not, in many cases, reading becomes a huge challenge for people to really participate in community MRV. So we had ODK, which is a suite of tools about which I will talk a little bit in the next slide, and GeoDK and integrated forest monitoring. And also we tested and used some tools that have been developed for people who cannot read or write, such as Apelli and CyberTracker. We also discussed a web-based platform for participatory mapping called Moabi, and we also talked about the possibility of linking MRV of carbon and community MRV with, for example, assessment of biodiversity safeguards, for example, through collecting sounds from the forest, as well as the enabling framework that provides approaches such as participatory mapping. Next. So among the tools that we tested, as I said before, we work with Open Data Kit, which has become very popular for the collection of data with cell phone technology. It's a free and open source set of tools. It's not only one tool. And it helps organizations design, implement, and manage mobile data collection. It's, as I said, it's an umbrella term that includes a series of different technologies. And it provides out-of-the-box solutions for users, for example, to build data collection from surveys, collect data on a mobile device, and set it up on a server and then share it. ODK is free, which makes it very interesting for this type of work. And that means that nobody owns it, and there's a large community of developers around the world that can improve and modify the basics and customize it for specific needs. Originally, these technologies were not designed for MRV, but for health monitoring. But since the evolution has been enhanced by MRV and RED and all these things, it has been incorporated in several initiatives for community MRV. It was initially designed by the University of Washington, and it's currently being used in different settings. A derivative of that is GeoDK, which, apart from collecting data, it allows it to be stored in a georeference way. Basically, you can link the data that you collect in your service to a specific location, which is of particular interest for MRV or forest emissions or carbon, but also very likely for communities themselves for their own interests if they want to do or carry out geospatial analysis of the information that's been collected in the field. Another tool that we tested was the GeoWiki Pictures, which is a tool that has been developed by the GeoWiki project. which is a global network of volunteers who wish to improve the quality of global land cover maps, because large differences occur between existing maps, and somehow it's difficult to know which map is of good quality. So they decided to try to outsource the validation required for assessing the quality of the data by crowdsourcing. It has been used to determine the potential of additional agricultural land available to grow crops in Africa, for example. Volunteers are asked to review hotspots of global land coverage agreement and determine based on what they actually see on the ground, hopefully, and or using other sources of data, if the data are correct or incorrect. And their input is then incorporated into a database, along with hopefully uploaded photos that are used for future creation of new and improved global land cover maps. A similar tool to that is the interactive forest monitoring tool for real spatial spatial data collection, and it's under development by the University of Wageningen. All these tools require a certain level of capacity from the users, and among those capacities, they need the user to be able to read, which took us to the use of or graphic interface tools like Sapelli, which is a mobile tool for mobile collection and sharing, designed by the University College of London's Extreme Citizen Science program, which is the XCITE-S. And the focus is non-literate and illiterate users. Okay, so and the idea is to provide indigenous people with tools that empower them to take action to protect their local environment and way of life. Cyber Tracker, which has as well a method of data collection and knowledge that uses images and uses and does so in a georeference way, was developed by Louis Liebenberg and Justin Stevenson in South Africa in the late 1990s. So this is a long-going tool that has seen a lot of updates and improvements. And it was initially designed to record highly developed skills of the game trackers in the Kalahari. So that's why their symbol is a SAM game tracker. It has developed a primary component of non-profit organizations to improve environmental monitoring for conservation globally. Cyber Tracker is used by indigenous communities, scientific researchers, citizen scientists, and environmental planners and managers. The measuring biomass carbon component application has been developed recently. The core is the focus on measurements required for carbon MRV. Each tool was assessed independently by all the workshop participants. It was tested in the forest, in the field, collecting actual data, and then participants provided reviews, including criteria such as ease of use, accessibility, practicality, etc. All the results of these assessments are included in the report coming out of the workshop, about which we will talk about later. Based on this feedback, those developers who were in the workshop were able to collect valuable information to update, improve, or develop new tools. Users have gone back to the communities and or entities where they work and have begun sharing the knowledge that they acquired about the tools and how to use them for specific purposes on the ground. And dialogues have been established between the developers of the tools and the participants for the enhancement and improvement of their use for, among other things, CMRV, but also national MRV practices. Now, all this is good for the design part of CMRV programs and the tools that might be incorporated into such activities. However, it's always good to have a good example on how this actually has happened on the ground, and that's why we will be talking now about the example of the Guyana northern Rupununi communities, about which Lucy Goodman from Global Canopy Programme will be talking to you now. Thanks.
Naikoa, do you want to talk briefly about Moabi?
Okay. Thank you very much, Naikoa, for... Yeah.
Yes, sorry, yes. I forgot about Moabi, sorry.
And the one after that.
Yes, a tool that I was forgetting about is a web interface that was initially developed by WWF US and WWF Forest and Climate Program, which is the Moabi web platform, which works in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it's a participatory mapping tool that allows for people to visualize existing geospatial data on land use, land cover, and REDD-related activities. It also allows them to incorporate their own reportings and or mappings about specific locations where relevant things that they want to share through the site have been going on. And as such, it has an interface of a social media platform for discussion and validation of what's reported there. This tool has been considered by the government of DRC as a potential candidate for their validation approach of the data that they are supposed to be delivering on MRV, and has gone through several updates. It's now an independent endeavor that's under the project Improving Forest Governance through Independent Monitoring in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We use this tool in a participatory way in the workshop to try to see its potentials, but also discuss the potential linkages with data collected in the field with the phone technologies that we tested, and incorporate those in platforms such as this one. And then finally, to provide a context for the assessment of the tools, not only from the technology side, but also from the viability and practicality of the implementation of their use. We talked about participatory mapping, which is a set of practices and technologies that have the potential of helping us to provide a framework for the use of these tools and incorporate all the process of discussion, and as a means of providing a context for not only collecting of CMRV of carbon, but also the issues of governance and incorporation of topics that are particularly interesting and relevant for the communities themselves. So the idea here was to talk not only about MRV of carbon itself, but really land into the idea that MRV for communities needs to be holistic, and it needs to incorporate elements that are relevant to themselves. And one means to incorporate that and initialize the process is participatory mapping. Finally, as a means to establish an initial link between MRV of carbon and participatory mapping, we carried out an exercise on collecting data with digital recorders on sounds in the forest while doing the exercises with the tools. And the idea was to see how easy it was for communities not only to use technologies to do MRV of carbon in the forest, but also collect data that can very easily by themselves be analyzed to identify different species in specific locations, and then run analysis that allow them to deliver biodiversity data that is comparable to that of scientists, as several publications that have recently come out have proven. In the end, we were able to assess the tools, collect data on forest cover, as well as biodiversity, and analyze it with all the participants in the workshop. Apologies for my mistake.
Okay, thank you very much, Nico, for running us through that. And I'd like to thank WWF for giving the Global Canopy Programme an opportunity to talk about a project that we're all very proud and excited to be part of in Guyana. And this project that I'm about to talk about involves several key partners, including the Global Canopy Programme, which are the North Rupununi District Development Board, which is an organisation for community development and governance in the North Rupununi, which is community-led, and Ira Karama, who are providing technical and scientific support to the project. And I'm giving this presentation on the behalf of all of us. So the objectives of the project in Guyana are firstly to demonstrate the value of community monitoring for national MRV systems, particularly where Guyana has its relationship with Norway, where they receive performance-based payments to reduce their deforestation. And this is critical because Amerindians currently hold legal title to 13.9% of the land in Guyana. A second objective of the project is to test technology. So Open Data Kit, which Naikoa was speaking about early in the presentation, is the technology that communities are applying currently in the North Rupununi. The third objective was to support the communities to manage their natural resources by collecting useful information on the following monitoring themes, which are natural resources, including information on freshwater quality, hunting and vegetation cover, also on forest change, for example on the drivers of deforestation, and well-being, that's community well-being, so trying to get a measure of the health of the communities and education. So that was what the project set out to do, and it's currently covering an area of 300,000 hectares, all of which is under Amerindian title. It involves a project management team which is community-led by 5 people with 32 monitorers, which is 32 monitorers means that there's 2 individuals who are monitoring these themes per village. And over the course of the last four years, 6,000 data points have been collected across the area by the communities themselves. And this has been supported by the Open Data Kit technology, which has had high setup and high maintenance costs, and has included a lot of technical training. You go to the next slide. Okay. So I wanted to share some high-level learnings about the technologies that were applied in Guyana, because I think this is one of the more interesting things that has come out of the project. Firstly, technologies have allowed the youth to connect to the elderly in the village. It's been a bridge because young people are quickly able, it seems, to use and adapt to smartphones, even if it's novel in the community. Whereas the old people in the village will be the people who have the knowledge of the forest which is required for the surveys. So in this way, an interesting learning from the project has been the bridging technology that it has brought. Secondly, for data collection, we found that technology has been very useful to reduce issues in terms of collating and collecting and transcribing data. Because if we did not have the smartphones to collect data using Open Data Kit, then we'd be using paper, and that would introduce a whole load of issues with storage of data and collection of data. Nevertheless, we found that technology hasn't supported us to undertake the analysis of the data to produce meaningful results for community members. There's still a big lead time between the data being collected in the community on the mobile phones and the feedback of the results that will ultimately lead to outcomes. So it would be better if the technology could automate the data analysis and provide it back to the mobile phone so that the monitors themselves could see the results, rather than what currently happens, which is that the data is collected, it comes back to Oxford to be analysed, then it goes back to Guyana to be printed, and then it has to be physically distributed and presented. And given the remoteness of some of the communities in which we are working, it means that it could be a day's journey to reach the communities who originally collected the data 3 months prior. So this remains a challenge that technology has not yet supported us with. Go to the next slide. So I wanted to give you just 3 outcomes of the project, and of course there are many outcomes, and please do read the case study which is on our website. It will give you much more information. But I highlighted these ones because some of them are expected and some of them are unexpected. So one of the unexpected outcomes is that from the social well-being survey, it was understood that alcoholism was one of the biggest issues out of the well-being issues in the community. And there was found to be a link between alcohol consumption and domestic violence. So when this information was presented back to the villagers, to the village leaders, in fact, in some communities, alcoholic spirits were banned and were not available for sale to try and address this issue. And in the follow-up survey the following year, it was demonstrated that this was now less of an issue. So it was an unexpected but very positive outcome. A second outcome is that as a result of the forest change surveys on deforestation, leaders are now encouraging farmers to undertake more savanna farming and less farming which includes the clearance of forests, and they're encouraging better farming techniques to increase yield. And a final unexpected outcome from the monitoring framework, which included indicators that communities themselves found to be important, was as a result of road traffic surveys. We're going to create community policing groups and establish barriers to try and control drug flows, which may be coming through the large road that run through the community land. So some interesting but unexpected outcomes. Go to the next slide, please. So to take a step back from the Guyana project and instead to talk more broadly about the conclusions of the workshop and of the workshop reports, what do we learn in the workshop and conclude about how we can increase data flow between communities and the government? I think the first but maybe most obvious and important one is that it's important to identify indicators and data which are important to both communities and to government, because this will increase the sustainability of any initiative which is set up to monitor that data. It's important that the information that comes out of the survey is going to be relevant to communities, because then they will want to collect it and they'll have the motivation to do so. And also that it could be relevant to the government, because this might mean something about financial support that the government may then provide to the community. Brian Alacock, one of our colleagues from the North Rupununi District Development Board, posed us the question during the workshop, what should we do next? You know, we've been leading on this project in Guyana and the North Rupununi, and now we need to know what we're going to do next with our monitoring surveys. And obviously, if financial support could be provided by the government to continue the collection of data, this would enable the data flow between communities and the government. We also need to be careful with the language that we're using and try to avoid using jargon, because this can be a barrier to data flow between communities and the government. We found that the acronym CMRV has actually created some confusion with other indigenous groups in Guyana, and often the project that's being run has been perceived to be a carbon MRV project, when in fact carbon is only one of the multiple surveys that's been undertaken as part of the project. So I think we should be very careful about the language being used to increase the amount of data flow. And then openness is an incredibly important factor when you're trying to encourage data flow. There needs to be two-way trust between the community and the government. The governments trust the data that the communities are producing, and the community needs to trust that the data will be used in a way that respects their rights. Go to the next slide, please. So here are some suggestions of how we can encourage this link up between communities and government when it comes to data being used. So if the data is to be used within a national report, it should presumably follow a government protocol. That means that any data that's connected in community lands is going to be coherent and comparable with the data that is collected by the government. So in order to facilitate this, clear guidance being available on data collection and data protocols from the national level will enable communities to collect relevant data. More than just that, it's important that communities can receive training in that particular protocol and in that particular guidance in order for it to be correctly carried out and the data that they've collected to be correctly used. And to give an example from the Guyana project, when we initially started the project to measure biomass, there was not an available protocol from the government because the project was out of sync with what was going on at the national level. So in fact, the data that was connected in the initial phase is not going to be coherent with the data that's been collected at the national level outside of Amerindian lands. It's also important to analyze whether or not technology should be used at all. In some cases, it may be a barrier. So in order to facilitate this link up, you need to make sure that the right technology, the right digital technology, ODK or CyberTracker or Sapelli, is going to be applied in order to support communities collect, share and analyze the data. We may find that for RED+, communities are very well positioned to provide information on RED+ safeguards and drivers of deforestation, and this would be a key way to link community data to the national level. Go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to leave with four messages. The first one is that if we are serious about RED+, we need to be serious about community involvement. And this should go beyond just consultations, but community should be involved in design of RED+ actions and should be empowered to monitor them and to improve them. So they're vital stakeholders in RED+ implementation, and they should be included in forest monitoring. We also feel that information gathered should be relevant to both communities and the government for RED+. So it shouldn't just be taking a big, potentially international framework and applying it at the local scale. It needs to be brought down to a relevant level for communities and also, in fact, for governments. We need to take advantage of the fact that communities are the experts on their land and in their knowledge of that land. So if there can be data collection methods which capitalize and leverage the fact that communities are in that area every day, that they are able to monitor the drivers of deforestation, that they're able to be there when resources are being harvested, then we can find the most relevant methods for data collection that can get the most benefits for everybody. And finally, we're not just monitoring for monitoring's sake, but we want to have impact and we want to have change happen in the world. So we need to have a clear end use for the data, and the impact that we think that we want to have at the end needs to be taken into account during the design of the monitoring protocol so that there's a clear end use for the data. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you to Lucy and Maria and Naikoa for that presentation. And as our presenters alluded to, we have a new report that was just released yesterday, which highlights all of these findings that have been discussed here in the webinar. So I encourage you to visit the link at the bottom of that list to read through and find out more about the tools and approaches, about the lessons learned, the enabling conditions, about this case study that Lucy just presented, and then the key takeaways. So again, this link is in the follow-up email that you will receive after the webinar, and I encourage you to go and download it and use it for the work that you may be doing. So at this point, we will open it up to questions. So again, please use your question tool on your toolbar, and if possible, direct it to a specific presenter just to make things a little bit easier, but if not, we will make it work. So the first question is from Charlie Parker, and I think this can probably go to Naikoa. Charlie asks, how much of an issue is the absence or availability of cell signals? To what extent do these remote communities have mobile data? And if not, what are the implications for community-based forest monitoring? So Naikoa, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. Long time. There are several questions there, no? So I'll go by parts. Well, the approaches that we tested and were gauged towards the situation in which there was no cell phone access and or web access, no? So that was very much part of the scenario where we're working. It was not a real issue. The methods and the approaches that you can set up allow for, if you have the know-how, set up things in a way that you can collect the data in your phones and then upload it and or transfer it either through a web interface or through the cell phone network. So that's something that we were able to see and learn how this can be carried out. The second part of the question, can you repeat it, Bryn?
Sure, let me get to it. So the second part is, to what extent do these remote communities have mobile data? And if not, what are the implications for community-based forest monitoring?
Well, one of the things that we discussed in the workshop that we came to realize is that use of cell phones is much more widespread than what we have the tendency to think. So that's why these set of tools that are based on these smartphones are taking so much hold in the implementation of these type of programs. Now, that being said, you have a lot of diversity. There's places where the use of smartphones is a given. There's places where it's not. And that's why some of the tools that we tested could work with visual interfaces, but others would give you the option of just using SMS as an alternative to transfer data. However, and I think this is a very good question, you need to have the capacity and or the support to adapt the use of the technology and the platform to the specific context where you're at. A key issue that has come to the discussions is that of uploading the data directly through to a computer for its analysis in an environment where there's no web access. A lot of these tools run the uploading of the data through a web interface, which requires access to the internet. And that has in some cases resulted that people have to gather the data for several days or weeks and then go and upload it, and then, well, you have all the worst case scenarios and horrible things that happen when you're in the field. No, you lose the phone or you lose the data and things like that. Even going to anecdotes such as the keyboard of the phone being too small and then the fingers of the community members being so big that they cannot use the phone. And things like that, no? So you have to have an adaptive approach to how you implement the use of these technologies.
Thank you, Nicola. And as we are going through these next questions, I'm going to ask Lucy to briefly tell us about some Global Canopy Program resources. Lucy, do you want to let our audience members know about these resources listed here?
Sure, thanks, Breen. I just wanted to highlight that we'd like to continue this conversation on community-based forest monitoring, and that we are providing resources on why you should be undertaking community-based forest monitoring, how you can do this, what technologies are available to support, what methods are there that can be used to produce, for example, activity data. We're providing a collation, like a central hub for the resources that exist on these different things, and also a hub for identifying who is working where in which countries, who's funding community-based forest monitoring, who's facilitating community-based forest monitoring, and who is participating in community-based forest monitoring. So we have a blog which is coming up on what the pros and cons, 6 pros, 6 cons of using technology for community-based forest monitoring, which my colleague Helen Belfield is producing. And I hope that you'll be looking out for that on forestcompass.org. And please contact us using the tab on the top right if you have resources or questions, or you'd like to be featured on the website as a case study. I've been looking at many of the questions in the chat box, and I've been thinking of some example case studies to send you in response to those. Thank you, Breen.
Thank you. So we'll keep going with the questions, and again, please keep them coming. These are great questions. So the next question is, I suppose, for either Nicola or Lucy, and the question is there any problem in using the GPS for data collection? GPS is the most common tool in my country, though I don't know where our question asker is from, while working with communities, but perhaps, Nicola, you can briefly touch on any challenges associated with using GPS for data collection?
Yeah, there's none actually. The GPS is the root of all this collection of data in a geospatial way in the field. Well, not the real root. I mean, we have been doing that for many years before the onset of the GPS technology. But yes, I mean, basically, there's no problem there. In many cases, we have to go back to the GPS and then use a piece of pencil, a paper and a pencil to collect the coordinates in a field form, because the technology is, the question with technology is not if it's going to fail, but when, no? So it's always good to carry with yourself a notebook. But the reason why we're looking into cell phones is because when you really think about it, a smartphone nowadays, first of all, has a good quality GPS, has a camera, has a digital voice recorder, has a web interface, has a notebook, and has a lot of things in one small, simple device. So one of the things that happened to me during the workshop is that it landed on me that, boy, with the cell phone, I don't have to carry all these things in my backpack, which is both good and is bad, because if I lose the phone, then I lose everything, whereas if I carry all those things, I might only lose one. But yeah, there's no problem with the use of GPS. One of the issues that you might face is the quality of the GPS, how accurate the data, the location, the geolocation of the data that you're collecting will be. But then you need to be aware of what the data you're going to be collecting are going to be used for, and therefore how accurate it needs to be. In most cases, for MRV and community MRV, the very accurate geolocation is not needed. And when you really think in the understory, you're usually, in the best case scenario, ranging in between 2 and 3 meters of the actual location. Now, that being said, we faced a lot of problems. For example, when people would start or turn on their GPS in the phones once inside of the forest, because then the calibration of the GPS inside the phone would not work. And then the geolocation would be a difficult one. So people actually had to go and look for gaps and places where the canopy cover was open. And then access to signal from GPSs for calibration would work. And then they would get back into the forest, which is the same thing with the regular GPS. So, but no, there's no problem with the use of GPSs. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Nico. That was very thorough. So the next question we'll put to Lucy, and Lucy, Alex asks, were you able to estimate activity data through these community-based monitoring surveys, and what can be used to estimate greenhouse gas emissions? So if you can tell us a bit about that and your experience with the Guyana case study that you covered, we would love to hear more.
Thank you very much for this excellent question, because it really speaks to the heart of whether or not communities can input into MRV systems at the national level, which require activity data, which is the area of change in different forest covers and lands covers. So the communities were asked to verify a remote sensed image that had been interpreted by the government to do two things, both to try and assess the accuracy of the activity data or the land cover map that had been produced at national level, and to try to understand what the drivers of deforestation were in that particular region where deforestation had been identified. It was possible to do this, but there were some issues around the GPS accuracy, actually relevant to the last question, and also in terms of the way that the data itself had been projected onto the map that was being used by the community. So I can say that in the Guyana project it was tested and it was done, but it was also a challenge, and maybe where communities can really add value is where they're identifying what the driver of deforestation might have been within an area of deforestation change. Also, information that was provided ultimately to the government by the project was information on farm area within the Rupununi's lands. So this could be used as activity data by the government, which could be fed into the MRV system. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And as we go to the next question, I'm just going to advance the slide and let this one sit. These are some additional WWF resources. So again, I think probably the top one is most important for you, as the archive of this and other learning sessions are available at this link. And then the next one is a free and open online platform for people who are working in RED. So please feel free to visit these websites along with the rest of the sites listed there. And the next question, I will see if Lucy or Naikoa would like to tackle it, but this is actually a really great question. Viola asks, how do you deal with issues of data ownership and intellectual property rights? Who decides how data will be used and shared? So maybe, Naikoa, do you want to start, and then Lucy, if you would like to follow, if you have thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bryn. And thanks, Viola. That's an excellent question, and this is one of the things that we discussed a lot during the workshop among the participants. And it has to do with two elements. The first one has to do with making MRV interesting to communities, no? So it has to do with the data and the topics of the data that are to be collected. These can include MRV data, specific carbon data, and it has to be as well with data that are pertinent to the community only and that they are not interested in sharing with, for example, the national entities in charge of these matters, and so on. The conclusion was that these pertain to what would be the realm of institutional arrangements and the policy context within which CMRV needs to occur for the information flow to happen from the communities towards the national entities, but also from the national entities towards the communities. And this has to do with data ownership. So a typical case that we discussed was that national MRV systems produce data, but then it's not readily available for stakeholders and or communities to be used for even assessing if the things that are happening within their territories is to the liking of them or not, and vice versa. And the principle of transparency and clear and established terms of reference in the engagement between the national MRV entities and the community MRV and the communities themselves need to be established about that. And this includes, among many things, data ownership. Is there a silver bullet to that? We don't think there is. It's going to have to be, first of all, linked with a legal framework for RED implementation. That's one of the findings that, that we obtained during the discussions. But it will also have to be negotiated on a case-by-case basis because of the singularities that communities have among themselves. No? So this is a ripe field for discussion and future work. Lucy, I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
Yeah, thank you, Viola, for this question. I mean, I can definitely tackle the latter part of the question, which is who decides how data will be used and shared. I think that the very clear answer to that is that the community should decide how the data should be used and shared. And to use the case of Guyana, there was a participatory process of deciding not just whether or not the data would be shared, but what data would be shared in what way. So we had a system where we had green data, which was voted on in a public consultation, and green data is data that can be shared completely widely and it's received community approval, and no process needs to be gone through before that data is shared. Then there's amber data, which is data that requires a consultation before it will be released. So there are some restrictions on how it could be shared externally, or even between communities. There was some data that the community members felt that they were happy for their own individual village to know about, but not happy to be shared with the adjacent village. And then there was red data, and that data was so sensitive that it could not be shared externally at all, and it needed to have a review before it could be shared externally. So that was the system that was used in Ghana, and it's been at the moment formalized within the national two showers, sorry, not the national two showers, the two showers of the communities which are participating in the project, because it's important, as NICOA says, to run the data sharing protocol through the local governance structures. So it's been something which a lot of time has been devoted towards in the Guyana case study.
Thank you, Lucy. And the next question is from Dennis, and I think this is for you as well because you did mention the high startup costs for the work in Guyana. And Dennis asks, regarding the high setup costs, do you see any scaling up effects or learning curve effects, either for capacity building or upfront investments? So Lucy, do you want to tackle that?
I can definitely try and... So I can give you some insights from the Guyana project, because we recently did an analysis of the setup costs and then the yearly running costs. And the project, I should mention, has been running for 4 years. we found that the project costs for technology have not declined in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, they've remained more or less the same because of the training needs, which needs to be continuously updated. But other projects have shown that the costs do tail off over time, like if you're looking more over a time frame of perhaps 5 or 6 years, because once you've purchased the equipment and undertaken the training, then it can become cheaper. I think we always need to be cross-referencing against the alternative scenario, which might be pen and paper, which has its own costs in terms of trying to, if you've lost the pen and if you've lost the paper, then you have to redo the entire survey, while the data will hopefully always be stored in a digital way. So we haven't yet found that technology in that particular case becomes cheaper over time, but I would say that that's because we haven't looked at it across a long enough time frame. And that report will shortly be on the website.
Thank you, Nick.
Perhaps I can complement a little bit here.
Please, yes.
Yes. Well, one of the reasons why we had government agency participants in the workshop was to touch this issue, because CMRV projects and activities so far have been funded on a project basis, which has been the case in the GCP, and then so the issue of carrying the cost of implementation has been managed that way. But if we really think that CMRV needs to become a stable component and a cornerstone of the MRV process as a whole, the cost of maintenance as well as the institutional and financial arrangements for that to happen need to be part of the overall national MRV process. And that's why we had these participants there. And then there's acknowledgement of that. But the problem that we face is that even national MRV systems implementation in many countries are also being run and have been funded on a project basis. So basically, governments have not included the activities and the operation of the MRV as part of the overall operational expenditure. In the hopes that foreign agencies and or development support agencies would continue funding it. So that's certainly a major problem that needs to be tackled. And one way that we think is by linking both the national and the community MRV, providing the context and the framework for that to happen. But then you come face to face with the issue of the national MRV processing being managed in a similar way, no? And it's a problem for all of us to try to figure out.
Thank you, Naikoa. And as we're getting to the end of our time here, I'm going to ask for just a final closing thought from Lucy and then from Naikoa, and then I will bring us to an end here with this session. So Lucy, any final thoughts here on this topic or on the experience that you want to share with our participants?
I'd just like to thank again our project partners, the North Rupununi District Development Board and Aokarama, who've been critical to the Guyana project. And moving forward, we hope that we can share the lessons learned on the website, which is www.forestcompass.org. And please don't be shy. Do get in contact with us if you have anything that you'd like us to share or you'd like to learn about to do with community-based forest monitoring. Thank you very much, WWF, for this opportunity.
Thank you. And Naikoa, any closing thoughts? And Naikoa, you're on mute if you're talking.
Thank you, Bryn. Just to highlight the fact that I think that the CMRV constitutes a very significant way forward, not only for Red Cross, but in general for natural resource management and the work with communities and indigenous peoples, no? And as such, the emphasis on the fact that not only carbon data, but all other kinds of data, as the example that Lucy shared with us for Guyana, is of significance. As funny as it is that I almost forgot about the biodiversity component, I think that that's a major contribution that CMRV can do, and not only in terms of assessing biodiversity per se, but also the quality of life and social livelihoods of communities themselves, as well as to aggregate that into national data sets. And of course, the massification of the use of the cell phones is certainly catalyzing that. So as a result of my work in CMRV now, I have a smartphone, which I didn't used to have, so as an anecdote. Finally, just to close, this work of CMRV will not be able to deal or provide the context for the work with communities to work. One of the things that was very much highlighted is that these processes work when the communities are organized themselves to begin with. But if we expect the implementation of the CMRV program to deliver the internal community organization, then we're going to have a lot of pain to endure, because that's a work that needs to be done by communities themselves beforehand for these type of endeavors to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you again to our presenters today. Thanks to everyone who attended. Here are a few ways to stay connected with us from the WWF side of this presentation, and we hope to see you at our next session. Thank you again. Bye.